The Wind Waker is a phenomenal entry in the Zelda series, and even more than 2 decades after its release, there are plenty of secrets, Easter eggs, and behind-the-scenes facts waiting to be discovered under the surface. Welcome to MojoPlays, and here are 20 things you may or may not know about the Wind Waker. But before we dive in, we publish new content all week long. So be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The cancelled sequel. We are all likely aware of the backlash Wind Waker was met with upon its reveal. Some fans saw the cel-shaded visuals as too kid-friendly and desired an evolution of the style seen in previous 3D entries. Still, Nintendo did initially plan to stick with it. Director Eiji Aonuma and his team planned to create a direct sequel for the GameCube. But when the game undersold in North America, where many of the complaints were coming from, and with game sales in Japan being low overall at the time, they scrapped those plans in favor of a more mature title to win back Western players. This would become Twilight Princess, which was much more financially successful. Wind Waker eventually did get its sequel in the DS's Phantom Hourglass, but it would have been nice to get a full-scale follow-up on the home console. Animation inspiration. One look at Wind Waker and you can probably tell that its visuals were inspired by Japanese anime. But which one specifically? Many have credited Yoichi Kodabe, who worked with Nintendo for over 2 decades, as being the chief animator for the game, and having taken inspiration from a film he worked on, 1963's The Little Prince and the Eight-Headed Dragon. However, thanks to an investigation from the Hyrule Journals, we now know that's not entirely correct. The misinformation stemmed from a Famitsu interview in which Kodabe claimed that Wind Waker may have been inspired by the film, but that he himself didn't work on the game. Interestingly enough, in an interview with 4Gamer, director Eiji Aonuma gave inspiration credits to a different film that Kodabe worked on, 1971's Animal Treasure Island. Trouble with selfies. This one deals more with the HD remaster on Wii U, but it's an interesting fact nonetheless. One of the items Link gets in Wind Waker is the Picto Box, a camera that allows him to turn pictures of enemies and characters into figurines at the Nintendo Gallery. In the HD version, a new feature allowed for players to turn the camera around so that Link could take selfies. Eiji Aonuma argued for their inclusion, claiming that since they're such a huge part of culture that everyone does, it would be weird for them to be absent in a game that has a camera. The remaster's director, Daiki Iwamoto, initially refused as the feature was difficult to implement. According to Aonuma, he tried to convince Iwamoto of it several times before he finally relented. All in the eyes. Toon Link is one of the more expressive iterations of the character. A lot of it comes down to his large eyes, with him even looking towards helpful items or hinting at solutions of puzzles. But Nintendo originally toyed with other ideas for his eyes. Zelda creator Shigeru Miyamoto wanted there to be a reason for them to be so big. One idea was for them to change colors in different situations, like red when Link was in a fight. A stranger idea was to give him a power-up that let him shoot beams from his eyes. Ultimately, the simpler use, tying them to his expressiveness, was the right call. Aging up. Link stays the same age throughout the Wind Waker, but apparently the developers considered including an older version of the character similar to Ocarina of Time. Concept art of the game, first revealed in the book Hyrule Historia, shows an aged-up version of the hero. However, unlike Ocarina of Time, there's an in-between stage, implying he would have aged more gradually instead of moving between time periods. This seems to not have made it very far in the development period, and was probably scrapped due to technical difficulties. Wind Waker famously had a lot of content cut due to time constraints, but it would have been interesting to see how this played into the story. Fatherly advice. If you think that the King of Red Lions, Link's companion in the Wind Waker, seems a bit stern and overly cautious, there's a reason for that. Much of his dialogue was written by director Eiji Aonuma, who had recently become a father while he was working on the game. According to him, he wrote the dialogue as if he were talking to his own son. However, when the HD remaster was released, it caused Aonuma to look back on the character less fondly. He viewed the king as having a, quote, self-important attitude. He somewhat regretted his decision and tried to tone him down for the newer version. Hidden loading. One of the bigger complaints from those who dislike Wind Waker, other than the art style of course, is the Great Sea. Personally, I feel it's a fantastic overworld, and exploring its mysteries and islands is a joy, but to each their own. For those who have often felt like sailing can grow boring, there is a reason as to the exact speed you travel and the placement of the islands. In an interview with Japanese magazine Nintendo Dream, with thanks again given to the Hyrule Journals for translating, Aonuma stated that if the sea were any smaller and the islands closer together, the game wouldn't have been able to load each location before Link arrives. Likewise, the speed of your boat was decided on to hide the game loading each area. This obviously wasn't as big of an issue in the HD version, which introduced the Swift Sail to let Link travel faster. Octorok pots. Okay, one place where the Great Sea does grow a bit dull is with the infamous Triforce quest. Still, it holds an interesting Easter egg that most players likely didn't encounter. After Link gets a Triforce chart and pays Tingle a ridiculous amount of rupees to decipher it, the location of the shard it leads to will be marked on the Great Sea by a beam of light. However, the light vanishes as soon as you draw near. Sometimes, if you narrowly miss pulling up the shard's chest, Link will instead pull up an old pot covered in barnacles, which then causes an Octorok to spawn next to him. This is a reference to octopus pots, used by Japanese fishermen to catch octopuses, a method that hasn't been used in a long time. The Hyoi Pear. Going back to that Nintendo Dream article, it also explains the name behind one of the least used items in Wind Waker. The Hyoi Pear allows Link to control a seagull so he can collect items or hit switches from afar. It's really only needed for a couple of instances, but the name comes from the Japanese word for possession, Hyoi. Since it's kind of like Link is possessing these birds to do his bidding, it makes sense. Another fun fact is that the Hyoi Pear is called the put-put fruit in the German version, with put-put being a term one would use to lure in or call to small birds, like chickens. String physics. Dark Horse's Zelda Encyclopedia naturally holds a lot of great behind-the-scenes facts about the series. As far as Wind Waker goes, it reveals an unexpected connection to Majora's Mask. In The Wind Waker, there's a surprising amount of care put into the physics of strings and rope. Whether you're swinging from a rope, cutting vines, or battling Puppet Ganon, it's impressive for a game that was released in the early 2000s. Nintendo was inspired by Majora's Wrath, the final phase of the final boss in Majora's Mask, who uses whips to fight. They even brought on the same programmer to capture the realistic physics of those objects. Playing with crabs. A lesser-known piece of the game's cut content was going to center around crabs, which you can find on multiple shores throughout the game. Going back to that Nintendo Dream article, Aonuma mentioned they wanted to be able to do multiple things with the crabs, but didn't go into detail as to what they would have been. And development finished before they could figure it out. Interestingly, while most figurines at the Nintendo Gallery are of enemies and NPCs, 2 are for the seagull and crab. However, seagulls play a bigger role in the game. Perhaps this crab figurine is left over from what the developers originally intended. The Sounds of Evil. We love a musical Easter egg, almost as much as Nintendo does. And there are some great ones at the Forsaken Fortress. The first time Link visits the area, he'll get captured by the Helmarok King, the giant pet bird of Ganondorf, who commands it to toss him into the Great Sea. During this cutscene, we hear a slowed-down version of Ganondorf's battle theme from Ocarina of Time. The second time we're here, Link is confronted by Phantom Ganon, whose appearance is accompanied by the same notes we hear in the original game right before the fight with actual Ganon. During the fight, you can hear notes from 2 battle themes against the Big Bad. One is from A Link to the Past. The other, used again, is from Ocarina of Time. Power of the Pig. The Wind Waker is one of the few games to not include cuckoos since they were introduced. It's a famous running joke that, after Link attacks one of these birds enough, they'll call their friends and rip him to shreds. Well, Wind Waker has something different. Pigs. Just like cuckoos, if you hit one enough times, a group of pigs will unleash their fury on Link. There's another instance that shows how strong they are. The giant pig, found on Outset Island after Link returns, can deal 3 hearts worth of damage. In terms of damage dealt, that makes it the strongest enemy in the game. Baiting the Boss. Bought at Beetle's shop, the all-purpose bait is mostly used as payment for the fishmen, so that they'll give Link information on an island and draw it on his map. There are other uses though, such as feeding certain animals for specific benefits, like rats and pigs. One place you might not expect it to be used is in the Puppet Ganon fight. During the boss's final form, you can toss some bait on the ground as a distraction, giving you a small window to deal damage. This is by far the hardest part of the fight, itself one of the hardest in the game, so this small advantage is definitely helpful. Pikmin Details. There's a small nod to another GameCube release that players may not have noticed if they weren't looking for it. After Link collects the 3 Goddess Pearls, he takes each to a different island and places them in the hands of a statue, which opens the Tower of the Gods. Each statue looks slightly different, but they share features with Pikmin of a similar color. The statue of Din has the same nose as a red Pikmin, the statue of Nehru has the same mouth as a blue Pikmin, and the statue of Furore has the same ears as a yellow Pikmin. Since both franchises were created by Shigeru Miyamoto, it's a neat reference. A working name. There are a ton of characters across the series whose names are puns, but the one in Wind Waker likely went unnoticed by many of us who don't speak Japanese. Baito is a Hylian who can be found on Dragon Roost Island, looking for part-time work at the island's mail center. He's a bit slow to get there and apply, which humorously plays in with him holding a bag with a snail emblem on it. But his name is the better joke. It comes from the Japanese word arubaito, which means part-time work. Deku Leaf Origins. The Deku Leaf is a pretty cool item, allowing Link to blow huge gusts of wind, as well as float to places out of reach. But at first, the aspect of gliding wasn't part of it. One last time, we look to the Nintendo Dream article. According to Aonuma, the item was originally just a fan, able to produce gusts, but not used to glide. During development, he realized that riding on wind in order to fly to new locations would be a valuable feature. And he was right. The fan turned into something a bit more magical and interesting, and gliding became highly useful. A joke reward. The Savage Labyrinth is one of the tougher challenges in the Wind Waker, a 50-floor combat dungeon with increasingly difficult encounters. After 30 floors, Link gets one of the Triforce charts, or one of the shards in the HD version. And after completing everything, he's rewarded with a piece of heart, or the Hero's Charm in the HD version. However, in the Japanese version of the original game, things are different. That piece of heart is actually found in a chest underneath Grandma's house, which holds 100 rupees in other versions. You'd think then that the 100 rupees would be in the chest at the end of the Savage Labyrinth, but it's actually a mere 10, which is just brutal. Breaking pots. In Zelda games before the Wind Waker, Link could break any pots he wished to claim what was inside, whether they were in somebody's house or not. But in this game, you can actually be punished for it. If Link breaks the pots inside the house of Mila's father, he'll warn you before charging you 10 rupees for each one. You'll run into a somewhat similar situation on Outset Island with Sue Bell, the girl who spends her time carrying a pot of water above her head. If Link shoots the jar and then speaks to her, she'll also take 10 rupees from his wallet. Sword markings. Once again, we look to Ganondorf and his Phantom for some of the coolest but smallest Easter eggs in the game. On the villain's dual swords, you can make out an inscription of Hylian text. For the Japanese version, this could be translated to Koume Kotake, the names of the witches that make up Twin Rova in Ocarina of Time, that were also Ganondorf's surrogate mothers. However, in the US localization, the inscription was changed, for whatever reason, to read "Real Thing," before being changed back for the HD version. Similarly, you can make out an inscription on Phantom Ganon's sword that reads Zubora and Gabora, the blacksmiths from Majora's Mask. Why this phantom would have their names on its sword is unknown, but it's a great secret nonetheless. Do you know any other fun facts about Wind Waker you feel the average fan doesn't know? Share them with us in the comments.